Hello. Yes, hello, you stubborn night owl. Instead of sleeping like a respectable mammal, you decided to press play on a stranger's voice and let them ramble in your ear for the next couple of hours. Bold choice. Dangerous choice. But here you are, and here I am, and tonight's theme is not glamorous, not heroic, and definitely not Instagram-worthy. How medieval peasants survived the coldest nights. Forget the fairy tale castles gleaming under the moonlight. Forget the noble knights polishing their shiny armor. And please forget the idea that anyone in the year 1300 had access to a mattress that wasn't alive with at least 3 kinds of bugs. The reality of medieval life is mud, smoke, body odor, and the kind of cold that makes you question if your soul has already abandoned your body. Yes, this is the bedtime story you chose. Congratulations. Now, before I drag you into this damp little hut with me, let me do the most medieval thing possible. Beg for your support. Unlike medieval peasants, I don't need you to pay taxes to a local baron. Just press the little thumbs up. And maybe subscribe. That's cheaper than a chicken tithe, and I promise it keeps this kind of nonsense alive. Done? Good. So, now that you've liked and subscribed, or pretended to, I can't actually check, I'm not God, nor your landlord, let's talk comfort, or more accurately, the lack of it. Picture this. It's January. There's frost on everything. Your hut has walls made of sticks covered in mud, and your roof leaks with every mood swing of the weather. You don't have central heating. You don't even have a candle unless you've made it from animal fat. And yes, it smells like sadness and regret when you light it. You, my modern listener, probably panic if your Wi-Fi goes down for 15 minutes. Now imagine not just losing your Wi-Fi, but also your walls, your bed, your sense of dignity, and about 3 of your toes. That was winter for peasants. And still, they survived. Spoiler, not because life was good, but because death was worse. The bed? Oh, you'll love this. It's straw. Not the golden fairy tale kind, but the itchy, smelly, bug-infested one. You share it with your entire family, and sometimes the animals too. Think of it as medieval Airbnb. No privacy, questionable cleanliness, and you can't leave a bad review because everyone in your village already knows you smell. And the cold? Forget fluffy blankets. Forget even wool socks, unless you're lucky. You might have one rough woolen blanket, and it's so scratchy it could double as medieval sandpaper. But you cling to it anyway, because without it, you freeze. Now, because I know you're still too awake, I'll give you a gift. Let yourself sink into this world. Dim the lights, shuffle around until your pillow feels less like a rock and more like a cloud. Take a slow breath, because this isn't just a lecture, it's a time machine. You're about to slip into another life. Congratulations. You just woke up in the year 1312 in a muddy village somewhere in Northern Europe. It's dawn. It's freezing. Your stomach is empty, your hands are cracked, and the first sound you hear is a rooster screaming in your ear like the medieval version of an alarm clock. Except this one doesn't have a snooze button unless you're willing to commit poultry homicide before breakfast. And even then, joke's on you, you wouldn't get breakfast.
You open your eyes. Well, not exactly open, more like you peel them apart because they've been glued shut by the sheer amount of smoke, dirt, and medieval despair floating around the one-room hut you call home. Congratulations! Your eyelids are the stickiest part of your body this morning, which is saying something because everything else also feels sticky. The first thing you notice is the cold, not the fun, refreshing Instagram snow trip kind of cold. No, this is the kind of cold that makes your bones feel like someone swapped them with frozen sticks. It seeps into your skin, creeps into your joints, and refuses to leave, like an unwelcome house guest, who not only stays past midnight, but also eats your bread. You're lying on straw, but let's not romanticize it. This isn't golden straw, carefully laid out like a rustic mattress topper. This is scratchy, slightly damp, bug-riddled straw that smells suspiciously like goat. You share it with your entire family. And yes, that includes the children, who kick in their sleep, the grandmother who snores like a malfunctioning bellows, and the occasional chicken that wandered in overnight. The air? A blend of smoke from last night's fire, manure tracked in on muddy boots, and the sour tang of unwashed bodies. Congratulations, you just discovered medieval aromatherapy. You try to stretch, but immediately regret it. Your muscles ache as if you spent yesterday hauling sacks of grain, chopping wood, and being yelled at by your feudal lord, which, to be fair, is exactly what you did. There's no ergonomic pillow, no memory foam, no gentle alarm clock with bird sounds. Instead, the rooster outside has taken it upon itself to shriek directly into your soul at an ungodly hour. It is the medieval alarm clock, more reliable than your iPhone, and much harder to snooze unless you plan on committing poultry murder. So, you sit up. The blanket, singular, slides off your shoulders. It's made of wool so rough it could strip paint off a wall. And you clutch it back around you as if it were the last scrap of dignity in your life, which, frankly, it might be. Your breath comes out in visible puffs, little clouds in the dim light. The fire in the hearth is long dead, just cold ash and a faint smell of yesterday's smoke. You'll have to coax it back to life, and by you, I mean whichever unlucky soul is forced out of bed first. Spoiler, that's you. Before you even think of food, let's discuss hygiene, or the medieval version of it, which is basically don't die of filth immediately. There's no toothbrush. You might, if you're lucky, rub your teeth with a twig or chew on some herbs. It works about as well as you'd expect. Your breath could knock out a small mammal, but then again, so could everyone else's. Baths? Hilarious. Maybe once a month. Maybe less. For now, you splash your face with freezing water from a bucket, which is either refreshing or a form of torture, depending on how numb you already are. Your clothes are next. Wool. Always wool. Scratchy, heavy, and eternally damp, because nothing truly dries in this climate. You put on the same tunic you wore yesterday, and the day before, and possibly for the last 3 months. Laundry is a concept reserved for nobles or people with rivers that aren't frozen solid. You cinch a rope around your waist because belts are a luxury, and then you shove your feet into leather shoes that have seen better centuries. Socks? If you're lucky, bits of cloth wrapped around your toes. If you're unlucky, nothing at all. Now comes the fun part, breakfast. Or, as it's called here, the crushing disappointment that reminds you you're alive. Don't imagine pancakes, eggs, or anything remotely exciting. You get a chunk of stale bread, possibly dipped in watered-down ale, because clean water is for fairy tales. If you're extremely fortunate, there's some porridge. It tastes like sadness, but at least it's warm. If you're extremely unfortunate, you skip breakfast entirely and just get on with your day fueled by hunger and rage. While you chew on bread that could double as construction material, you look around the hut. The walls are wattle and daub, sticks plastered with mud. Every crack lets in a draft. The roof leaks. Smoke from the hearth has nowhere to go, so it lingers, stinging your eyes and coating everything in soot. The floor? Dirt. Actual dirt. You live in a box of mud with a hole in the roof. And yet this is considered normal. You don't complain, because there's no one to complain to, except maybe God, and he's been suspiciously silent about home renovations. Outside the village stirs. Cows low, pigs grunt, dogs bark. You hear your neighbors, equally miserable, coughing their way into the day. The soundscape of medieval life is not birds chirping and lutes playing, it's hacking lungs, clattering buckets, and someone already shouting about how the firewood is damp. You shuffle towards the door, which is a wooden plank that barely fits the frame. The cold outside hits you like a punch. Frost glitters on the ground, but not in a magical winter wonderland way, in the your toes will turn black if you stand here too long way. You pull your blanket tighter around your shoulders and trudge forward knowing the day will be long, brutal, and completely devoid of anything resembling comfort. And yet, somehow, you survive, because that's what peasants do. Not because life is good, but because quitting isn't really an option. If you lie back down, you freeze. If you refuse to work, you starve. If you try to complain, you get punished. So, congratulations. You've made it through the medieval morning routine. Hope you enjoyed your breakfast brick and your splash of ice water. Now get ready, because the day hasn't even started, and you're already exhausted.
You step outside, dragging your body through the morning air that feels like knives on your skin. Your stomach is still growling because half a crust of bread does not count as breakfast, but you don't get to negotiate with the Middle Ages. There's no HR department to complain to, no sick day request you can file on parchment. The sun is barely above the horizon, and already your life has been claimed by the fields, the Lord, and the relentless weight of survival. The first order of business: work. Always work. Your Lord owns the land. You own nothing. Not the soil, not the crops, not even yourself. At best, you have the right to exist here so long as you bleed for it. That's feudalism in a nutshell. Your back, their profit. The fields stretch out, half frozen, half muddy, and entirely hostile. You grab your wooden tools, which are so blunt they could double as comedy props, and set to digging, hoeing, or whatever miserable task the season demands. Summer, you're bent double, hacking weeds out of the earth. Autumn, harvesting crops that you won't even get to eat. Winter, hauling firewood and praying you don't die of frostbite before you've stacked enough logs to impress someone who doesn't care. Your hands are cracked, your fingernails black with dirt. Splinters are a daily accessory. Gloves? Absolutely not. You rely on calluses and the occasional miracle. Every time you grip your tool, it's like shaking hands with pain. Yet somehow you keep going, because what else is there? Let's pause here. You, in your soft bed listening to this, might think, I'd never survive. And you're right, you wouldn't. Not because you're weak, but because medieval life was a full-time hazing ritual designed to break people. Your modern complaints about traffic, emails, or that one guy in the office who microwaves fish? Luxuries. A medieval peasant would listen to you, blink twice, and then die laughing. Except they'd probably choke on their last stale crumb of bread first. Back to the fields. The soil isn't kind. The plow is pulled by oxen, not by machines. You walk behind them, guiding the blade, stepping into mud up to your ankles. The smell is a combination of manure, sweat, and despair. The ox doesn't care about your schedule. It moves when it wants, stops when it wants, and occasionally relieves itself in the exact spot you were standing. Medieval teamwork. And then, of course, comes the Lord's steward making his rounds. He checks the progress, makes notes, maybe yells at you for existing too slowly. Taxes will be collected later in grain, chickens, or your sanity. The point is, as much as you produce, a large slice vanishes into someone else's stomach, someone who hasn't touched a hoe in his entire life. Congratulations, you're fueling the feudal economy with your misery. By midday, your body is screaming. Your back feels like it's trying to escape your spine. Your arms are jelly. Your feet are soaked and frozen. Do you get a lunch break? Sort of. You sit on a rock, pull out more bread, stale, harder than your hopes, maybe some thin soup if you were lucky enough to have a wife, mother, or daughter simmer it the night before. Meat? Don't be ridiculous. Cheese? Rare. Vegetables? Sometimes, but usually the ones that nobles didn't want. Mostly, you get gruel. You eat it, not because it's good, but because your body needs fuel to keep pushing through the day. Around you, others do the same, silently chewing, occasionally coughing, everyone too tired to waste words. Conversation is a luxury. Energy conservation is survival. Then, back to work. Always back to work. If the sun is up, you're laboring. The rhythm of your day is dictated by the seasons, by the sky, by the whims of lords and weather. And the weather, let's be honest, hates you. Too much rain, crops rot. Too little, crops wither. Too cold, everything dies. Too warm, pest party. You are at all times one bad season away from starvation. Congratulations, your pantry is nature's hostage. And yet, despite the misery, there are small moments. You glance up at the sky, see a bird fly overhead, and for a second you think, freedom. Then the ox pulls, the mud sucks at your boots, and you remember, no, not freedom, just peasantry with extra bird watching. Afternoon crawls by, your muscles burn, your fingers are numb. You shift from one task to another, each equally mindless, each equally necessary. Threshing grain, chopping wood, carrying water, mending fences. Every task is survival disguised as work. You don't do it for fun. You do it because if you don't, someone else will take what little you have. By the time the sun starts to dip, you're exhausted in a way that modern gym-goers pay money to imitate, except they get smoothies and protein bars afterwards, and you get more stale bread. You don't get endorphins. You get the creeping suspicion that your knees will never stop hurting. And yet you keep going, because tomorrow will be the same, and the next day and the next. Work is the air you breathe, not because you love it, but because without it you don't exist. That's medieval life, an endless loop of labor, hunger, and survival, occasionally interrupted by a festival where you drink bad ale until you forget your misery for 12 hours. Congratulations, you survived the workday. Sort of. Your body is broken, your spirit dented, your stomach still empty, and the Lord is still richer than you. And the best part? You get to do it all again tomorrow. Sweet dreams. After a day in the fields, you stumble back toward the hut you dare to call home. Calling it a home is generous. It's more of a glorified storage shed where you and your entire family stack yourselves like damp firewood. If you've been picturing a cozy little cottage with smoke curling prettily from the chimney, stop. Delete that image. Replace it with a low, smoky box made of mud, sticks, and whatever scraps the village didn't need elsewhere. Congratulations! You are now inside your medieval Airbnb. No privacy, no heating, and an unlimited supply of drafty air. The walls, if you can even call them walls, are made of wattle and daub, sticks woven together and plastered with mud and dung. Yes, dung. Because when you're poor, you use whatever building materials are available, including the stuff falling out of animals. The result is insulation that works about as well as wearing a single sock in a snowstorm. Every gust of wind whistles straight through the cracks. When it rains, the water seeps down the walls, leaving you damp, cold, and wondering why you weren't born into a family that owned at least one castle. Let's talk about the floor. Dirt. Just dirt. Packed down, sometimes covered with rushes or straw if you're fancy. And that straw? Changed maybe twice a year. In between, it absorbs every spill, every crumb, every bodily fluid, and serves as a 5-star resort for fleas, lice, and whatever insects want to hitch a ride. Think of it as a medieval carpet. Low maintenance, high infestation. Furniture? Don't make me laugh. If you're lucky, there's a rough wooden table and a bench. Beds are for nobles. You have straw mattresses, which, as already established, are less mattress and more itchy sack of sadness. Storage is minimal. Clothes are hung on pegs, food is shoved into corners, and tools lean against the wall because there is nowhere else to put them. Every surface is smoky, sticky, and just slightly damp. Speaking of clothes, let's examine your wardrobe. Spoiler, it's not a wardrobe, it's a pile. You own one, maybe 2 tunics. They are made of wool, scratchy enough to leave permanent marks on your skin, dyed with natural materials that fade quickly into indistinguishable shades of brownish gray. Shoes are leather, worn thin, patched until there's more patch than shoe. Socks are rags. Underwear is a theory more than a practice. Laundry happens rarely, which means your clothes carry the scent of smoke, sweat, and everything you've done in them for weeks on end. Comfort. Ha! The word doesn't exist. Warmth comes from the hearth, which doubles as your kitchen, your heating system, your light source, and your fire hazard. The smoke has no chimney, so it fills the room, stings your eyes, and coats your lungs with a nice layer of medieval tar. Children crawl around coughing, old people wheeze in the corner, and you, lucky you, develop a lovely chronic rasp that will accompany you until you die of something completely unrelated, like the plague. Ah yes, the plague. Let's discuss disease because your immune system has entered the chat. You live close to animals. pigs, chickens, cows. And by close, I mean they sometimes share the same living space. They track in mud, manure, and diseases. Clean water is unreliable, sanitation is non-existent, and germs are having the medieval equivalent of an all-inclusive vacation inside your body. Diarrhea? Common. Fevers? Constant. Death from infections that modern medicine would clear up with a single pill? Practically a family tradition. Doctors? Only for the wealthy. For you, medicine means herbs, prayers, and sometimes just bleeding a little bit into a bowl because someone thought that would balance your humors. Spoiler, it does not. The good news is, you don't live long enough to worry about chronic illnesses. The bad news is you might not live long enough to worry about anything. Let's circle back to food because even when you're not in the fields, your stomach never shuts up. Dinner is basically the same as breakfast. Bread, porridge, maybe some cabbage or beans if the season allows. Occasionally you get lucky with cheese. Meat is a holiday-level luxury. And sweets? Forget it. Sugar exists, but it's worth more than your life. Honey is the closest thing, but bees aren't exactly cooperative neighbors. Most days, your meal tastes like monotony sprinkled with disappointment. Now imagine you're sitting in this hut, chewing on your tough bread, smoke burning your eyes, your children scratching at their flea bites, and your spouse muttering about the roof leaking again. You're wrapped in the same wool blanket that smells like smoke, sweat, and possibly goat, and you think, at least I'm not naked. Congratulations, you just found the medieval definition of gratitude. But here's the ironic twist. This hut, this smoky, drafty, bug-infested hut, is safety. It's the difference between life and freezing to death outside. Those scratchy wool clothes, they keep your body from literally stiffening in the cold. That disgusting porridge, it keeps you from collapsing in the field. Comfort in your world is not about softness or warmth or luxury. It's about survival. And survival, as thin and bleak as it feels, is still something. So you huddle closer to the fire, coughing as the smoke stings your throat, clutching your bowl of gruel, scratching at the flea bites on your arm, and you think, tomorrow will be the same. The house won't get better, the clothes won't soften, the food won't improve, but at least you'll wake up. Probably. And in medieval Europe, probably is as close to comfort as you're ever going to get.
After choking on smoke, chewing through disappointment disguised as dinner, and scratching at flea bites until your skin looks like a medieval map of rivers and valleys, you might ask yourself, was there anything fun? Anything at all that peasants did besides freeze, work, starve, and die prematurely? And the surprising answer is yes. But don't get too excited. Fun in the Middle Ages is not Netflix, theme parks, or binging snacks at 2 a.m. It's more like standing in a muddy square with everyone you've ever met, drinking questionable ale, and pretending your life doesn't suck for a few hours. Let's start with religion, because you can't escape it. Not that you'd want to. Your entire worldview has been marinated in the church since the day you were born. The church bell is the original medieval calendar app. It tells you when to wake, when to pray, when to work, when to stop, and when to gather because someone important said so. Sundays are the one day you don't work in the fields, which sounds relaxing until you realize you're spending it standing through a 3-hour mass in a freezing stone building where the sermon is in Latin, a language you absolutely do not understand. Congratulations, you're bored, hungry, and confused, but hey, at least you're saving your soul. Religion is everywhere. You cross yourself when you wake up, when you eat, when you sneeze, when your ox looks at you funny. Saints are your superheroes, and relics, bits of bones, scraps of cloth, are basically your spiritual insurance policy. You don't argue theology because arguing theology is how you end up accused of heresy, and heresy comes with penalties involving fire. Best to nod, pray, and move along. But the church isn't just doom and sermons, it's also the center of your social life. Baptisms, weddings, funerals, they're community events. It's where gossip spreads faster than the plague. Who's having an affair? Who's behind on taxes? Who stole a chicken? Don't worry, everyone will know by the end of Mass. Medieval small talk is relentless. Outside religion, there are festivals. Ah, festivals! The medieval version of an all-you-can-suffer buffet with a side of alcohol. Picture the entire village gathering, Music played on instruments that sound like tortured geese. People dancing in circles until they trip. Jugglers trying to distract you from the fact that your shoes are sinking into mud. And the ale. Always the ale. Brewed at home, cloudy, sour, sometimes laced with whatever herbs were lying around. You drink it anyway because it's safer than the water. After a few mugs, you forget your back hurts. You forget your fields are failing. You forget your Lord is rich at your expense. For one night, you're invincible. Until the next morning, when your head feels like it's being split with an axe and you still have to work. Games? Yes, but not the kind you're thinking. There are dice games, rough ball games that look suspiciously like early versions of soccer, wrestling matches, and the occasional drinking contest. Children invent games with sticks, stones, and their boundless ability to turn anything into entertainment. Adults mostly drink. Gambling is common, which means losing what little you have to someone else's lucky roll of the dice, but the thrill is worth it because in a world where everything is predictable, cold, hunger, toil, the chance of luck feels like rebellion. Let's not forget storytelling. In the evenings when the fire still glows and you're too tired to move but not tired enough to sleep, stories come alive. Myths, legends, saints' lives, ghost tales, anything to distract you from the reality of your hut. You listen, you laugh, you shiver. Maybe someone sings, badly but enthusiastically. Maybe a traveler passes through with new tales from far-off lands. For a moment, the world feels bigger than mud and frost. And then, of course, there's gossip. Gossip is the medieval internet. Who married who? Who didn't marry but definitely should have? Who got caught stealing grain? Who looks suspiciously well-fed? Information spreads like wildfire, and with it, judgment. Villages are small, privacy non-existent, and everyone has an opinion. Congratulations, you're trending in 1312 because your cow wandered into the wrong yard. Relationships are also practical and messy. Marriages are arranged, love optional. You marry for survival, for land, for alliances, for children to help in the fields. But that doesn't mean people don't fall in love or cheat or sneak behind haystacks in moments of rebellion against monotony. The church says sex is only for procreation, but villagers are human, and humans are very creative about ignoring rules that don't suit them. Family is survival. Children are workers in training. Parents are exhausted. Grandparents hang on as long as possible, coughing in the smoky hut, dispensing advice no one asked for. Every member contributes, or the family suffers. There is no such thing as independence. You're tied to your kin, your neighbors, your village. Isolation equals death. And so your leisure, your beliefs, your community, they all blur together. Religion gives meaning. Festivals give escape. Gossip gives entertainment. Family gives duty. It's not glamorous. It's not comfortable. But it's what you have. And in a world where tomorrow is never guaranteed, sometimes one night of ale, bad dancing, and laughter is enough to make you forget the cold waiting outside.
The sun might set. The festivals might distract you with bad ale and worse music. But make no mistake, violence is always lurking in your medieval life. Not cinematic, choreographed violence with knights clashing in shiny armor, but the everyday, grinding violence of punishments, feuds, raids, and the occasional war that tramples over your fields like you're nothing but an inconvenient patch of mud. Let's begin with justice. Or, rather, justice. Imagine you stole a chicken, not because you're malicious, but because your children are starving, and the neighbor's chicken wandered too close. Modern you might expect a fine, community service, maybe a strongly worded letter. Medieval you? You're dragged before the local court, likely presided over by the Lord Steward, who already dislikes you, and your fate is decided in a way that feels more like theater than fairness. A beating? Common. Stocks in the village square, where everyone gets to throw rotten vegetables at you? Very likely. Branding, mutilation, or worse? Entirely possible. All this over poultry. Congratulations, you're now a medieval cautionary tale. Public punishment is entertainment. The stocks are Netflix for the villagers, except the content is always your neighbor shivering in the rain with a sign declaring his sins.
Children laugh, adults jeer, and the priest nods sagely about morality while secretly enjoying the spectacle. Executions? Rare. But when they happen, the entire village shows up. Not because they're bloodthirsty, but because there's nothing else to do. You go for the same reason you'd go to a festival, because everyone else is there, and because you're secretly glad it isn't you. Then there are taxes, which feel like a form of slow-motion violence. Every harvest, the Lord takes his cut. The church takes its tithe. You're left with scraps. And if you can't pay, the punishment is brutal. Your goods seized, your family humiliated, sometimes your home destroyed. Poverty itself is a punishment, but in medieval Europe, poverty is universal. It's just that some people are slightly less poor than others, and those are the ones punishing you. Violence also comes in the form of raids and wars. You don't get to decide when armies march through your village. They appear like storms, tearing across your village, seizing food, burning houses, trampling fields. You're not a soldier. You're not armored. You're a victim, hoping the destruction passes quickly. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're conscripted, shoved into a line with a spear, told to march behind your lord's banner. Training? Minimal. Protection? None. You are medieval cannon fodder. Except cannons haven't been invented yet, so you're more like sword fodder. Bandits are another constant threat. Travel is dangerous. Roads are rough, forests are full of men who decided peasantry was too boring and crime was more profitable. You hear stories of ambushes, robberies, killings. Does that stop you from traveling? Not if you have to sell grain at the next market. Survival outweighs safety every time. And then, of course, there's war with nature itself. Famine, floods, droughts. They don't punish you with swords, but the result is the same. Suffering, death, despair. Every year you wonder if the weather will turn against you. Most years, it does. Violence doesn't always need a human hand. Sometimes it's just the sky deciding it hates you. Inside the village, disputes turn violent too. Boundaries over land, accusations of theft, insults at festivals. They escalate quickly when alcohol is involved. Fists fly, knives flash, grudges last generations. The church tells you to forgive, but your neighbor just stomped through your field and ruined your crop. Forgiveness is hard to find when your family's food supply is at stake. But perhaps the cruelest violence is casual, almost invisible. A child gets sick, no medicine, no cure. A woman dies in childbirth, no doctor, no help. An accident in the fields crushes a limb, no hospital, just a lingering infection until the end. The violence of everyday life is quieter than executions or raids, but it's relentless. You don't ask, will something bad happen? You ask, when? And yet, you endure. Because what choice do you have? You pray to saints, you cross yourself, you cling to the hope that God notices you. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. The priest says suffering makes you holy. You're not sure holiness is worth frostbite, starvation, and the constant fear of losing everything you barely have. So you live under violence. Not extraordinary, but ordinary. A background hum of threat, punishment, and loss. And when you finally crawl into your smoky hut at night, you're grateful for one simple thing, that today it wasn't you in the stocks, or under a soldier's sword, or coughing your last breath. Today, you survived. Tomorrow, we'll see. The sun sinks, slowly but surely, behind the jagged tree line. You might think that sunset means peace, that after a long day of bending, sweating, coughing, and regretting every life choice you never actually had, nightfall would offer some kind of reward. But no. Nightfall in the medieval world isn't cozy. It isn't safe. It's a curtain dropping over your already fragile existence, replacing exhaustion with fear. The fields fall silent, except for the occasional distant howl that may or may not belong to a wolf. Wolves are real, by the way. They don't care that you've had a long day. They care that you're edible. And so do other people. Bandits, wandering soldiers, desperate peasants with less than you, if that's even possible. Darkness isn't your friend. It's a reminder that you have no walls worth mentioning, no lights worth trusting, and no guarantee that tomorrow will bother showing up. You head back to the hut. Inside, the hearth is coaxed back to life. A handful of twigs, maybe some logs if you were able to drag enough from the woods. Fire isn't just warmth, it's survival. Without it, you freeze. With it, you choke on smoke. Your lungs are slowly being turned into medieval bacon. But hey, at least you're warm enough not to die tonight. Priorities. The family gathers around the fire. Dinner is more porridge, more bread, maybe a thin stew if someone bartered well at the market. Meat, again, is rare. On lucky nights, you might have scraps of bacon or a fish caught from the stream. You chew slowly, not because you want to savor the flavor. What flavor? But because stretching food means stretching life. After the meal comes the ritual of settling in. The door, if you can call a crooked plank a door, is bolted shut with a stick, more symbolic than practical. Anyone determined enough could push it open. You spread what little bedding you have across the floor. Straw, damp and prickly, blankets, itchy and smoky. You lie close to each other, a heap of humanity piled together not out of affection, but out of sheer necessity. Body heat is the only real blanket you can rely on. Candles? Rare. Tallow dips if you're lucky. Oil lamps if you're wealthier than average. Mostly you live in darkness, with firelight casting long, flickering shadows on the mud-plastered walls. Those shadows stretch, bend, twist. Children stare at them, wide-eyed, certain that demons or spirits are lurking just out of sight. Honestly, you don't dismiss the idea either. Religion has taught you that the devil prowls, witches curse, and the dead wander. With no streetlights, no locks, and no scientific reassurance, the night belongs to your imagination, and your imagination is cruel. The sounds don't help. Cracks of wood settling, wind whistling through the gaps, animals shifting in the dark. Every creak becomes a thief, every rustle a wolf, every groan of the hut's frame an omen. You lie there, staring into the smoke-stained rafters, ears straining. Your heart races at nothing, because nothing in medieval life has a nasty habit of turning into something when you least expect it. There are stories, of course. To pass the time, someone whispers tales, saints and miracles, devils and spirits, neighbors who saw strange lights in the forest. Stories are comfort and warning at once. They remind you to stay inside, to fear the night, to pray. The priest says faith will protect you. You clutch the small wooden cross hanging from a peg and hope he's right. Sleep doesn't come easily. You toss, you scratch, you cough. The straw pokes you in places you didn't know could be poked. The blanket smells like every meal you've ever cooked over the fire. Children kick, adults snore. Someone mutters in their dreams. Privacy? Non-existent. You fall asleep to the sound of your entire family breathing, snoring, groaning, farting. This is your lullaby. Romantic, isn't it? And yet, eventually, exhaustion drags you under. Not peacefully, never peacefully, but heavily, like drowning in fatigue. Your body shuts down because it has no choice. Tomorrow will demand everything again, and the day after that, and the day after that. The medieval night is not a time for rest. It's a time for enduring, a time for hoping the fire doesn't go out, the wolves don't come in, the sickness doesn't worsen, the soldiers don't march through. And if you wake in the morning, you call that a victory. Small victories stacked together until one day they stop. That's life. That's night. That's survival. The night, to you, is not just darkness. It is a living, breathing entity with opinions, grudges, and an appetite. You don't look at the sky and think about astronomy or the quiet poetry of starlight. You look at the sky and think demons, witches, spirits, maybe God if you're feeling optimistic. The medieval night isn't neutral, it's charged, humming with possibilities, most of them unpleasant. Superstition runs through your veins like cheap ale. You know, or at least you've been told, that witches roam after dark. That if your cow suddenly stops giving milk, it wasn't because she's old, it was because the widow down the road cursed her. That strange shadow in the field? Not the wind, not an animal, but the devil himself, testing your faith. And if you hear a knock at the door after midnight, don't answer. It's never a neighbor. It's always something worse. Dreams are serious business. You don't laugh them off as random nonsense produced by a tired brain. Dreams are messages, signs, warnings. If you dream of teeth falling out, someone will die. If you dream of fire, disaster is coming. If you dream of bread, well, that's just your stomach reminding you it's empty. But the point is, your nights are never free from meaning. Even in sleep, you're being lectured by the universe. The church has its own explanations, of course. Nightmares, the devil whispering in your ear. Sleep paralysis, a demon sitting on your chest. Restless nights, maybe you didn't pray hard enough. There's always a moral explanation, always a reason tied to sin, guilt, and the constant need for confession. You can't just wake up sweaty and exhausted. You have to wake up convinced you've offended God by existing incorrectly. And then there are the omens. Owls hooting near your house, death is coming. A dog howling at midnight, the devil is nearby. A shooting star, someone important has died. Everything means something, and that something is rarely good. The medieval night is one long game of connect the dots with your sanity, and the prize is usually fear. Children soak it all in, wide-eyed, terrified, convinced that the darkness is crawling with claws and eyes. Parents encourage it, partly because they believe it too, partly because fear keeps kids from wandering outside and getting eaten by wolves. Fear is parenting, medieval edition. But superstition isn't just paranoia. It's also structure. It makes sense of the chaos. If your crops fail, it's not just bad weather, it's a curse. If your child falls sick, it's not just germs, it's God's test. These explanations don't help you survive, but they help you endure. It's easier to fight the devil than to accept that the universe is indifferent to your suffering. Still, the rituals pile up. Charms above the door, herbs hung from rafters, prayers muttered before bed, a cross carved into the beam, a candle lit if you can spare the fat. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but at least you feel like you're doing something, and in a world where control is an illusion, the illusion itself is comforting. And let's not forget the gossip-powered supernatural economy. Someone saw lights in the forest, fairies, surely. Someone heard laughter by the river. Witches, obviously. Someone's cow dropped dead. Curse, no doubt. These stories spread faster than plague fleas, and soon the whole village knows who's suspicious, who's cursed, who's been seen muttering too much at night. Justice might come in the form of whispers, or torches, or worse. Congratulations, your insomnia has turned into a community sport. Even animals aren't safe from suspicion. Cats? Potentially demonic. Dogs? Guardians, but also howlers of doom. Crows? Messengers of death. Horses? Sometimes bewitched, especially if they refuse to pull the plow. You don't live with animals. You live with furry omens that occasionally provide food. So you lie there in the smoky hut, surrounded by shadows, fleas, and family members snoring like broken instruments, and you think, what does this night mean? You try to pray, you try to ignore the rustling outside, you try to interpret your half-dreams before they vanish. And slowly, fear becomes routine. You stop asking if the night is dangerous. You accept that it is. The medieval night isn't just an absence of light. It's a stage. And on that stage play your fears, your beliefs, your saints, your demons, your entire worldview. The night is a teacher, and its lessons are always about survival, submission, and the possibility that the rooster may not crow for you tomorrow.
The night isn't only fear and superstition. It's also the one time of day when the fields aren't claiming your spine, the Lord isn't shouting for more grain, and the oxen aren't glaring at you with their eternal bovine disappointment. Night is when the village exhales. It's not rest, exactly. Rest doesn't exist here. But it's the closest thing to a pause you're going to get. Picture this. The sun has fully vanished, the last smear of red is gone from the sky, and the only light comes from fires, yours, your neighbors, maybe the distant glow from the manor. Inside huts, people gather. Families sit shoulder to shoulder around the hearth, the smoke stinging their eyes, but at least they're together. The fire crackles, someone stirs the last of the pot, and conversation drifts like the smoke itself, thin but persistent. What do you talk about when you've spent the entire day doing the exact same thing as everyone else? Gossip, of course. Gossip is oxygen. You talk about who skipped mass, who's behind on taxes, who's definitely cursed because their goat gave birth to something suspiciously ugly. You lower your voice when you talk about the steward, louder when you talk about the neighbor who clearly waters his ale. Gossip is free, entertaining, and it makes you feel like your misery is slightly less miserable when compared to someone else's. There's laughter, sometimes. Real laughter, sharp and brief, like a spark from the fire. A bad joke, a child saying something absurd, someone mocking the priest's sermon in a voice so exaggerated everyone wheezes until their ribs ache. Laughter doesn't fix anything, but it makes the hut feel less heavy, less suffocating. For a moment, you're not peasants. You're just people, sharing air and noise. Some nights, neighbors gather together, maybe in a larger hut, maybe outside if the weather isn't too cruel. Someone brings ale, someone brings a fiddle or a drum, and suddenly you have music. Not polished, not professional, but raw and alive. Feet stomp, hands clap, voices rise in songs half remembered. Children dance, adults sway, and for a little while, life doesn't feel like a punishment. It feels like almost fun? Almost. And then there are the stolen moments. The young slip outside, away from the noise, into the shadows, behind barns, under trees, anywhere out of sight. They whisper, they laugh, they kiss. They pretend for 10 minutes that the world isn't made of mud and obligation. Romance exists, even here, even now, even under the weight of feudal duty. It's not grand, it's not epic, but it's real. A glance across the fire, a brush of hands, a meeting arranged under the excuse of fetching water. It's rebellion, disguised as affection. Older folks tell stories, legends of saints, tales of kings, memories of winters harsher than this one, when the river froze solid and wolves roamed the streets. Children listen with wide eyes, equal parts terrified and fascinated. Some of the stories are warnings. Don't wander into the forest. Don't trust strange lights. Don't anger the steward. Others are pure entertainment, with giants, dragons, and heroes who definitely never visited your village. Food might reappear, scraps shared between neighbors. A bit of cheese, a handful of dried beans, bread that hasn't completely turned into stone. Hospitality is currency. To share what little you have makes you honorable, respected, remembered. To hoard it makes you suspicious, whispered about, maybe accused of witchcraft later. So you share. You always share, even if it hurts. And always the fire. It is the center of everything. You stare into it when conversation fades. You poke it absent-mindedly. You let its light soften the faces of your family and friends. Fire is the only luxury you own, and it's fickle, demanding constant feeding. Someone's always adding a stick, rearranging the embers, making sure the glow doesn't die.
The fire is life. When it goes out, so does your safety. Eventually, the gathering dissolves. Neighbors shuffle back through the dark, clutching cloaks tighter, whispering last bits of gossip, wishing each other luck against wolves, bandits, and demons. Back in the huts, families collapse into piles of straw. The air is thick with smoke, sweat, and the faint aftertaste of laughter. You settle in, still scratching, still coughing, but with a little warmth in your chest. Because even here, even now, in the bleak cold of medieval night, people find ways to cling to each other, to share food, stories, laughter, even love. It's not comfort, not really, but it's connection. And connection in this world is the only shield you have against the dark.
Your body is not yours. It belongs to the fields, to the Lord, to the relentless march of labor. You wake up sore, you go to bed sore. And in between, you discover new muscles you didn't even know existed, mostly because they've started screaming. Every part of you aches. Your back curves before its time. Your knees grind like rusty hinges. And your hands are no longer hands. They are tools, cracked and calloused. Each finger permanently bent into the shape of labor. And yet, somehow, you endure. You don't get to stop. Rest is for nobles, and even then, not much. For peasants, pain is normal, expected, so constant that you barely notice it anymore. You don't say, "I hurt." You say, "I live," because in medieval Europe, the two are the same. But pain is only the beginning. Hunger is your real companion. It gnaws at you every day, every night, every season. Not always starvation, though that happens too, but hunger in its quieter, crueler form. Stomachs never quite full, meals that feel more like teasing than nourishment, bread that fills space but offers nothing else, gruel that warms the throat but leaves the belly empty. You're always just slightly hollow, just slightly weak, just slightly desperate. Hunger is not a guest. It's a permanent resident in your body. Malnutrition paints itself on you like a signature. Your teeth rot early, your bones stay stunted, your skin looks pale and rough. Children grow thin, ribs poking through. Adults never bulk up no matter how much they work. Strength isn't built on protein and rest. Strength is built on sheer necessity, on pushing through weakness because collapsing isn't allowed. And then there's disease. Oh, disease. You breathe smoke all night, you drink water that may as well be soup, and you live in close quarters with humans, animals, and parasites all competing for space. Congratulations, you're basically a medieval petri dish. Coughs linger for months, fevers sweep through villages, wounds fester because soap isn't really a thing, and antibiotics won't exist for centuries. A cut on your hand can mean a funeral. A bad winter cold can end in pneumonia, and pneumonia ends in death. Childbirth is a gamble, one in which the odds are stacked brutally against women. And yet, somehow, the peasants persist. Because the body, abused though it is, learns to adapt. You develop an iron stomach from years of questionable food. You develop calluses thick enough to rival leather. You develop a pain tolerance that makes modern people look like delicate porcelain dolls. You keep moving because your body doesn't get a vote. There's resilience here, strange and terrifying. Children bounce back from sicknesses that should have killed them. Adults stagger on with joints swollen, lungs wheezing, eyes clouded. People survive winters that look designed to wipe them out. You don't live well, but you live. And that's a victory, however small. The irony is that your body, fragile as it is also your only wealth. You can't own land, you can't hoard gold, You can't demand comfort, but you own your arms, your legs, your back, your sweat. If your body fails, everything fails. So you push it, punish it, force it forward. Pain becomes your currency. Hunger, your shadow. Survival, your only achievement. And when you collapse into your straw bed at night, coughing, scratching, groaning, you think, at least I made it through another day. At least my body didn't betray me completely. At least I am still here. Because that is the essence of the medieval peasant's body. Not health, not strength, not comfort, just endurance. Just the stubborn refusal to die. Until, inevitably, you do.
Winter doesn't arrive politely. It doesn't knock on the door and ask if you're ready. It crashes in like an uninvited guest, kicks your firewood pile, eats your food, and settles into your bones. By the time December smothers the village, you're already behind. Behind on fuel, behind on food, behind on hope. Winter is not a season. It's an opponent, and it always wins in the end. The cold doesn't just nip, it crushes. It seeps into every crack of your hut, every hole in your shoes, every joint in your body. The hearth struggles to keep up, coughing out smoke more than heat. You huddle closer, piling bodies together, chasing warmth that never fully arrives. Your breath fogs the air inside your own home. Water buckets freeze solid. The floor is so icy that even the fleas slow down. Sluggish little reminders that misery doesn't hibernate. Food is worse. The grain stores are dwindling. You count every crumb of bread, every handful of beans, every dried fish. Meals get smaller, thinner, sadder. You water down the gruel until it's little more than flavored steam. Children whine, old people sigh, and you chew slowly, trying to convince yourself that swallowing air counts as nourishment. Hunger sharpens, twisting your stomach into knots. You start dreaming of food more than anything else. Fat meat, sweet honey, warm pies. Dreams that taste better than reality ever will. Desperation breeds creativity. People stretch flour with ground-up acorns, bark, or whatever else they can find. Stew becomes a mystery. Cabbage, maybe, if you're lucky. Weeds and roots, if you're not. Sometimes you eat what you would never consider edible in summer. Boiled nettles, roasted rats, stale crumbs scraped together like treasure. Every bite is survival, no matter how foul. And the cold. You fight it with layers, not soft layers from a clothing store, but every scrap of wool and linen you own, piled on until you resemble a walking scarecrow. Gloves are rags wrapped around your hands. Scarves are strips of cloth tied haphazardly. Your shoes leak, your socks are fantasies, your skin is cracked and raw. Still, you go outside because animals need feeding, wood needs chopping, and the world doesn't care that you're freezing. Speaking of wood, you never have enough. The stack outside shrinks faster than you can refill it. You ration logs, burn twigs, scrape together anything flammable. Some villagers burn dry dung. It smokes, it stinks, but it keeps you alive. Fire becomes your obsession, your constant chore. Keep it alive or join the frozen dead. And then there's sickness. Winter coughs spread like wildfire through smoky huts. One child sneezes, the whole family hacks. Pneumonia takes the old, fevers take the young, and the weak vanish quietly under the straw. You pray harder, cough harder, hope harder. But hope doesn't warm the air or cure the sickness. You learn to accept loss as part of the season, the way modern people accept snow days. Yet winter isn't just misery. It's also community. You gather with neighbors, sharing what little you have. A loaf passed between families, a pot of stew stretched to feed one more mouth. You sing songs to distract yourselves, tell stories that make the shadows seem less threatening. Misery is easier to endure when shared. Loneliness kills faster than cold, and so you cling to each other.
And sometimes there are bright spots. The feast days when the church insists on celebration even if your pantry is bare. Christmas brings rituals, carols, and maybe, if you're lucky, a small piece of meat saved for the occasion. For a few hours, the village pretends abundance exists. Ale flows, bread is baked, fires roar. You forget the hunger gnawing at your belly, the frost biting your toes, the fear waiting outside. But when the songs end and the fires dim, reality seeps back in. Winter doesn't care about your festivals. It drags on, week after week, until your body is numb, your pantry is empty, and your patience is gone. You start measuring life not in months, but in fires kept alive, meals stretched, nights endured. Survival is not dramatic, it's boring, repetitive, relentless. And when spring finally arrives, it doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like crawling out of a grave. You're thinner, weaker, more scarred. You've buried friends, maybe family, but you're alive. And in medieval life, being alive after winter is the closest thing to victory you'll ever know.
Surviving winter in medieval Europe is less about triumph and more about stubbornness. And yet, when you crawl out of the frozen months alive, you can't help but feel like something cosmic happened, like you won a war you were never trained to fight. Because truly, surviving January in a hut made of sticks and dung is about as miraculous as turning water into wine, except your water was frozen and your wine was probably vinegar anyway. Think about it. You, with your body wrapped in scratchy wool, your diet consisting mostly of bread that doubles as a blunt weapon, and your health more fragile than a soap bubble in a windstorm, you faced off against the winter, and somehow, you're still here. If that isn't proof of divine intervention, then maybe you've just developed the medieval version of stubborn immortality. Every villager treats the first signs of spring like a resurrection. Birds singing, angels, a thawing river, literal proof that God exists. Green shoots breaking through the dirt, forget poetry, this is salvation in vegetable form. You look at a sprig of cabbage like it's the Holy Grail. It's ridiculous, but when you've spent months chewing on bark and despair, a green leaf feels like a banquet. And here's the thing. Survival itself becomes exaggerated in your mind. You don't just think, I made it through. You think, I endured trials that would make Hercules cry. Because perspective is everything. To you, dragging your half-starved body out of bed to chop frozen wood is more epic than slaying a dragon. At least the dragon would die eventually. Winter never really does. It just retreats, biding its time for the next ambush. You measure your strength not in muscles or glory, but in endurance. Modern people brag about running marathons, lifting weights, finishing CrossFit routines. You brag about not freezing to death in a hut that leaks from both the roof and the floor. Who's the real athlete here? You, with your smoke-damaged lungs and your frost-bitten toes, standing victorious over hunger and despair. Congratulations! You've invented the Winter Olympics, medieval edition, and the only event is not dying. It's tempting to romanticize it, of course, to imagine that hardship builds character, that suffering teaches wisdom. Maybe it does, but mostly it just builds scars, wrinkles, and a deep mistrust of clouds. You don't come out of winter enlightened. You come out of it tired, hungry, and slightly suspicious of anyone who claims life has meaning. And yet, the exaggerations persist, because when life is this bleak, you need to turn survival into legend. You tell stories about how the frost almost took you, but didn't. You compare your suffering to Job from the Bible, except Job at least had dialogue with God while you had nothing but a coughing fit and a frozen turnip. You paint yourself as a hero, because if you're not heroic, then what was the point of all that suffering? Your body is proof, too. The scars on your hands, the cracks in your skin, the cough rattling in your chest, these are your medals. Modern soldiers get ribbons. Medieval peasants get arthritis. But both are badges of endurance. You show them off not because you're proud, but because they're impossible to hide. Survival inscribes itself onto your body whether you like it or not. And so, the village, as spring creeps back, exaggerates survival together. Neighbors gather telling tales of how they nearly froze, nearly starved, nearly died, but didn't. Every family insists their winter was worse, their suffering greater, their survival more miraculous. It's not a competition exactly, but it feels like one. Misery Olympics, where everyone gets a medal for not being dead. Religion swoops in, naturally, to claim the credit. The priest reminds you that survival is God's gift, that endurance is proof of faith, that your frozen, hacking misery was part of the divine plan. You nod because arguing theology is dangerous, but deep down, you suspect that your survival had less to do with God and more to do with you refusing to stop breathing out of pure spite. Still, it's easier to frame it as a miracle. Miracles make better stories than stubbornness. In the end, exaggeration is its own form of survival. By inflating your suffering into legend, you make it bearable. You turn frostbite into epic poetry, hunger into moral drama, coughing into proof of sainthood. You can't escape the misery, but you can reframe it, drape it in grandeur, and pretend it mattered more than it did. And maybe that's the real miracle. Not that you survived, but that you convinced yourself survival was meaningful. That enduring wasn't just pointless suffering, but part of some grand, invisible narrative. That turning another page in your life, when every page looks the same, is somehow an act of defiance worth telling.
The coldest night is never just a temperature. It's a sentence, a declaration from the universe that you, personally, are unwanted. The air itself decides to wage war on your flesh, your bones, your very willpower. It isn't simply below freezing. It's below forgiving, below human tolerance, below the dignity of existence. If summer is a tyrant with a whip, winter is a slow assassin, creeping through cracks, robbing you breath by breath. And tonight, dear listener, tonight is the night it chooses you as its target. The fire flickers low, its embers glowing weakly, like the eyes of a dying animal. You poke it with a stick, desperately, pathetically, as if your scrawny arms could wrestle heat back into life. Sparks fly, but they fade too quickly, devoured by the greedy darkness that presses closer every second. The hut shivers in the wind, boards groaning, roof rattling, as though the building itself is trying to escape your miserable presence. Even your house wants nothing to do with you. You curl into the straw, but the straw is no comfort. It's cold, damp, unforgiving, filled with the skittering of creatures small enough to thrive where you fail. Fleas bite, lice crawl, mice scamper just out of reach. It's like trying to find comfort on the surface of a compost heap. You pull the blanket tighter, but it scratches, itches, mocks you with every fiber. This is not warmth. This is medieval exfoliation. And yet, your family presses closer. The weight of bodies is the only insulation available. Your child kicks in her sleep, heel landing squarely in your ribs. Your spouse snores, a sound like an exhausted ox gargling mud. The old grandmother mutters prayers under her breath, begging saints who are either too busy or too indifferent to answer. The hut fills with the smell of humanity, smoke, sweat, fear. It's revolting. It's suffocating. It's survival. Outside, the wind screams. It isn't just noise. It's language. A taunting, howling, endless chant. You will freeze. You will freeze. You will freeze. The sound seeps into your skull until it becomes thought, becomes conviction. You start to believe it. And why wouldn't you? The frost has already crept into your toes, your fingers, your ears. They burn at first, then go numb, then vanish from your awareness, as though the cold is slowly erasing parts of you, one by one, piece by piece, until what's left isn't you at all. And still, your mind wanders. Because humans, in their brilliance, can never suffer directly. They must detour, digress, elaborate. You think of warmer days, of bread fresh from the oven, of sun on your back, of water not frozen solid in buckets. You think of how your hut smells like smoke and goat, but you miss the goat that died last month because at least it was warm when alive. You think of your lord snoring in his manor, draped in furs stolen from your labor, his belly full while yours caves inward. You imagine sneaking in, stealing his blankets, curling up by his fire. And then you laugh. Not out loud, your lips are too stiff for that, but inside, at the absurdity of it all. You can't even steal warmth. Warmth itself refuses you. The night stretches on endlessly. Each hour an insult. Time slows, congeals, freezes alongside everything else. You count your breaths, because what else is there to count? You measure them like coins, each one a payment toward morning. But the morning is stingy, reluctant, refusing to arrive. You begin to wonder if the sun has abandoned you, if daylight itself decided to leave peasants to their fate. After all, why should the sun care about a smoke-choked hut filled with half-starved humans clinging to scraps of wool? And still, you exaggerate, because suffering always demands performance. You think, this is the coldest night in history. Never mind that last year was the same, and the year before that, and the year before that. Tonight feels worse because tonight you are trapped inside it. Tonight is the stage, and you are both actor and audience, whispering to yourself about how epic, how tragic, how unfair it all is. You imagine future generations telling your story, how you braved the frost, how you fought the night, how you nearly froze to death but didn't. The irony, of course, is that no one will remember. You are a peasant. You will vanish into mud and smoke. But still, the fantasy warms you, if only for a moment. The digressions multiply. Your brain, desperate to escape the cold, latches onto absurd comparisons. You think of modern people. Not that you know them, but we watching from the future can't help it. You compare your suffering to theirs. They panic when the Wi-Fi goes out. They complain when the office thermostat dips below 20 degrees Celsius. They wrap themselves in fleece blankets with cartoon characters printed on them. You're wrapped in misery, in wool that scratches like sandpaper, in a blanket older than you are. Congratulations, you're tougher than every modern human combined, though you'll never get the credit. The hut groans again. Snow piles on the roof. You imagine it collapsing, burying you all in frozen mud and straw. You wouldn't even resist. At least the snow would be quiet. At least it would be an ending, not this endless rehearsal of almost death. But no collapse comes. The roof holds, stubborn, like you. Misery, after all, is durable. And then, just when you think you can't endure another minute, you realize you've already endured several. That's the trick of suffering. It stretches, but it also passes. Slowly, invisibly, the night tilts toward morning. The fire flares a little as someone half asleep adds another stick. The wind softens, or maybe your ears have frozen too much to hear it. Your breath still fogs, but you can see faint light creeping in through the cracks. The rooster stirs, and you know, with dread, with relief, that you've made it. But let's not hurry. Let's not give the revelation too soon. Stay in the night a little longer. Feel the numbness creep up your limbs. Feel your lungs rasp against the smoke. Feel your stomach curl inward from hunger. Because this is the truth of the peasant's climax. Not glory, not triumph, but the endless, absurd ability to survive when everything screams you shouldn't. Survival is the most boring miracle, and yet it is the only one you get.
The coldest night is never just a temperature. It's a sentence, a declaration from the universe that you, personally, are unwanted. The air itself decides to wage war on your flesh, your bones, your very willpower. It isn't simply below freezing. It's below forgiving, below human tolerance, below the dignity of existence. If summer is a tyrant with a whip,
Winter is a slow assassin, creeping through cracks, robbing you breath by breath. And tonight, dear listener, tonight is the night it chooses you as its target. The fire flickers low, its embers glowing weakly like the eyes of a dying animal. You poke it with a stick, desperately, pathetically, as if your scrawny arms could wrestle heat back into life. Sparks fly, but they fade too quickly, devoured by the greedy darkness that presses closer every second. The hut shivers in the wind, boards groaning, roof rattling, as though the building itself is trying to escape your miserable presence. Even your house wants nothing to do with you. You curl into the straw, but the straw is no comfort. It's cold, damp, unforgiving, filled with the skittering of creatures small enough to thrive where you fail. Fleas bite, lice crawl, mice scamper just out of reach. It's like trying to find comfort on the surface of a compost heap. You pull the blanket tighter, but it scratches, itches, mocks you with every fiber. This is not warmth. This is medieval exfoliation. And yet, your family presses closer. The weight of bodies is the only insulation available. Your child kicks in her sleep, heel landing squarely in your ribs. Your spouse snores, a sound like an exhausted ox gargling mud. The old grandmother mutters prayers under her breath, begging saints who are either too busy or too indifferent to answer. The hut fills with the smell of humanity, smoke, sweat, fear. It's revolting. It's suffocating. It's survival. Outside, the wind screams. It isn't just noise. It's language. A taunting, howling, endless chant. You will freeze. You will freeze. You will freeze. The sound seeps into your skull until it becomes thought, becomes conviction. You start to believe it. And why wouldn't you? The frost has already crept into your toes, your fingers, your ears. They burn at first, then go numb, then vanish from your awareness, as though the cold is slowly erasing parts of you, one by one, piece by piece, until what's left isn't you at all. And still, your mind wanders. Because humans, in their brilliance, can never suffer directly. They must detour, digress, elaborate. You think of warmer days, of bread fresh from the oven, of sun on your back, of water not frozen solid in buckets. You think of how your hut smells like smoke and goat, but you miss the goat that died last month because at least it was warm when alive. You think of your lord snoring in his manor, draped in furs stolen from your labor, his belly full while yours caves inward. You imagine sneaking in, stealing his blankets, curling up by his fire. And then you laugh. Not out loud, your lips are too stiff for that, but inside, at the absurdity of it all. You can't even steal warmth. Warmth itself refuses you. The night stretches on endlessly. Each hour an insult. Time slows, congeals, freezes alongside everything else. You count your breaths, because what else is there to count? You measure them like coins, each one a payment toward morning. But the morning is stingy, reluctant, refusing to arrive. You begin to wonder if the sun has abandoned you, if daylight itself decided to leave peasants to their fate. After all, why should the sun care about a smoke-choked hut filled with half-starved humans clinging to scraps of wool? And still, you exaggerate, because suffering always demands performance. You think, this is the coldest night in history. Never mind that last year was the same, and the year before that, and the year before that. Tonight feels worse because tonight you are trapped inside it. Tonight is the stage, and you are both actor and audience, whispering to yourself about how epic, how tragic, how unfair it all is. You imagine future generations telling your story, how you braved the frost, how you fought the night, how you nearly froze to death but didn't. The irony, of course, is that no one will remember. You are a peasant. You will vanish into mud and smoke. But still, the fantasy warms you, if only for a moment. The digressions multiply. Your brain, desperate to escape the cold, latches onto absurd comparisons. You think of modern people. Not that you know them, but we watching from the future can't help it. You compare your suffering to theirs. They panic when the Wi-Fi goes out. They complain when the office thermostat dips below 20 degrees Celsius. They wrap themselves in fleece blankets with cartoon characters printed on them. You're wrapped in misery, in wool that scratches like sandpaper, in a blanket older than you are. Congratulations, you're tougher than every modern human combined, though you'll never get the credit. The hut groans again. Snow piles on the roof. You imagine it collapsing, burying you all in frozen mud and straw. You wouldn't even resist. At least the snow would be quiet. At least it would be an ending, not this endless rehearsal of almost death. But no collapse comes. The roof holds, stubborn, like you. Misery, after all, is durable. And then, just when you think you can't endure another minute, you realize you've already endured several. That's the trick of suffering. It stretches, but it also passes. Slowly, invisibly, the night tilts toward morning. The fire flares a little as someone half asleep adds another stick. The wind softens, or maybe your ears have frozen too much to hear it. Your breath still fogs, but you can see faint light creeping in through the cracks. The rooster stirs, and you know, with dread, with relief, that you've made it. But let's not hurry. Let's not give the revelation too soon. Stay in the night a little longer. Feel the numbness creep up your limbs. Feel your lungs rasp against the smoke. Feel your stomach curl inward from hunger. Because this is the truth of the peasant's climax. Not glory, not triumph, but the endless, absurd ability to survive when everything screams you shouldn't. Survival is the most boring miracle, and yet it is the only one you get.
So morning finally crawls in. Not triumphantly, not with trumpets or rays of golden sunshine, but grudgingly, like an old man forced out of bed. Light leaks through the cracks in the walls of your hut. Thin, gray, unimpressive. You survived the coldest night, though survived here means little more than still breathing and still itchy. Congratulations. Go ahead, clap for yourself. Nobody else will. The rooster screams, again, because that's its life purpose. Your bones ache, your lungs wheeze, your head pounds. But the universe doesn't care. The day has begun, which means work has begun, which means the whole cycle starts again. There's no grand reward for not freezing to death. You don't get a medal or a day off or even an extra crust of bread. Survival is its own prize, which is like winning a contest where the reward is being allowed to enter the contest again tomorrow. But in this anticlimax, there is a strange sort of meaning. Because what is life, if not one long chain of anticlimaxes? You build up hopes, expectations, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this year will be different. And then you wake up in the same smoky hut, with the same coughing family, to do the same back-breaking tasks. The miracle isn't change. The miracle is persistence. Let's linger here, though. Don't rush off. Don't think, okay, story done, lights out. No. Stretch the ending, the way you stretch the last crumbs of bread into something resembling a meal. Think about your straw bed. Itchy, lumpy, but familiar. Think about the fire, weak, smoky, but alive. Think about the people crammed beside you. Irritating, loud, but breathing. Survival isn't glamorous, but it's communal. No one gets through medieval life alone. And isn't that the strangest comfort? That you don't matter as an individual, but as part of a mass of equally suffering people. Modern life
celebrates individuality, achievement, personal success. Medieval life laughs at that. You're part of a field, a harvest, a tax roll. You vanish, your name forgotten, but the village continues. Your suffering joins everyone else's suffering, and together, somehow, that makes it lighter, or at least more bearable. And now, as you drift, not into work this time, but into sleep, think of how absurdly hard it all was. How every little thing, every crust of bread, every spark of fire, every half-decent blanket was the difference between life and death. How peasants managed not because they had much, but because they refused to give up what little they had. There's a lesson here, buried under the fleas and the smoke, though whether you want to take it with you is your choice. Maybe the lesson is that humans are stubborn, that even in mud, in hunger, in fear, we cling to life, clawing through winters that want us gone. Or maybe the lesson is that comfort, warmth, abundance, all the things you take for granted, are not natural, but fragile luxuries. Or maybe there's no lesson at all, just a very long lullaby designed to distract you until your eyelids sag and your phone slips from your hand. Either way, you've reached the end. The coldest nights have been endured, the fields have been worked, the smoke has been coughed through, the fleas have been scratched. And you, unlike the peasant you've been imagining, actually get to rest now. You can roll over in your warm, bug-free bed, close your eyes, and sleep without worrying that your blanket is judging you. So let the story fade. Let the voices of the past quiet down. Let the rooster of 1312 finally lose its power over you. You don't need to chop wood tomorrow. You don't need to face a lord demanding taxes. You don't need to survive winter with bark stew and frozen despair. You've done your duty tonight. You've listened. You've endured. You've imagined. Now, sleep. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, subscribe to the channel.